Hello everybody and welcome to WhoCulture's very first Retro Ups and Downs. Yes, you heard me right there, folks. And we thought, what better time to kick off our Retro Ups and Downs series than by celebrating another year of Doctor Who. This year, 2024, is the 61st anniversary of Doctor Who. Obviously, last year we had the 60th anniversary. We had 3 specials to celebrate that. So today, I am going to look back at the 50th anniversary special, The Day of the Doctor. Woo! Now, something that is new to our ups and downs, so if you're new to the channel, if this is your first ups and downs, don't worry, this is new to everybody. We have now come up with some super duper names for our super ups and our super downs. So keep your eyes peeled for any Artron ups or Deadlock downs. Let's get started.
I'm looking for the Doctor.
Well, you've certainly come to the right place.
Okay, so let's start nice and positive with an up for the opening homage of this episode. It's a perfect homage, obviously, to An Unearthly Child, which was the very first episode of Doctor Who ever aired in 1963. What I really like about this, though, is that it isn't a direct copy of that opening of An Unearthly Child. It's not just reused footage from that episode. It's subtle enough to be a nice nod to what started this whole Doctor Who journey without becoming too cheesy or on the nose. And then, of course, continuing with that kind of little homage, we go to Coal Hill School, which was a lovely nod there, where Clara is teaching a class and she gets a message and she heads off to meet the Doctor. Now, here's the thing, right? Don't worry, I'm not going to down it. It's just a me thing here. I don't know about you, but how does anyone else feel about Clara riding her motorbike straight into the middle of the TARDIS console room? Because to me, in my mind, the TARDIS is basically the Doctor's living room, right? So how would you feel, Clara, if the Doctor just decided one day to drive his car straight into your living room or ride his motorbike straight into your living room? Like, come on, bit of respect here. Like, what? Why? Why? Tell me what? Tell me why? So Clara meets the Doctor in the TARDIS, they're having a little chat, and then all of a sudden the TARDIS takes off, but it's not in flight. And it's quite literally being flown over London. Kate Stewart's gone, there's the TARDIS, we need that. Yoink! We'll have you, thank you very much. And yes, the TARDIS is flying over London via helicopter. Of course, if you have seen the 60th specials now, 10 years later, this was kind of repeated then as well. It's kind of strange watching these episodes in hindsight when more things have happened. You know, this isn't an Easter egg when it first happened, but now you can go, oh, this happened in this episode, but that was in the future, so technically the Easter egg was the 50th, and so once the TARDIS is dropped off in the middle of Trafalgar Square, also, can we just note that they just made no effort whatsoever to hide the fact that the Doctor is just holding on to holes in the bottom of the TARDIS, which clearly are not usually there. It was like they didn't even bother trying to hide that he was just holding on some handles. But also, let's just acknowledge that Matt Smith did his own stunt there and he genuinely was hanging from the TARDIS when they filmed that. So, well done, sir. Now let's go into another up, and that is the editing style for this episode. That transition through the painting to then reveal the War Doctor, that was absolutely stunning. I loved it so much. But just overall, this episode is cut together so well. I love those extreme close-ups, I like the quick cuts, I like the reverse shots. It's just a very different editing style to what the usual Doctor Who episode looks like, and again emphasizes that this is not just a standard episode, this is a special. Those super close-ups on characters' faces, especially when it's the Doctor, they really help us get into that uncomfortable closeness and to really peel back the layers to feel the bare bones emotions of the character in those moments, which I think works very well for the subject matter of this particular story. Then of course you've got those reverse shots, the quick cuts, and they really help to aid the jumping between different time zones, different characters, different plots that all culminate together into one story at the end. But just that editing style really helps you to jump between the various stories within the one story. Now folks, we knew it was only a matter of time. It's absolutely going to happen. It's me. I do it every single time, but take an up Murray Gold. I'm always going to up Murray Gold, so if you're bored of me upping Murray Gold, get used to it. This entire scene where we're witnessing the Time War for the first time, we're in seeing the Daleks destroying things, we're seeing children crying, people running and screaming. There's very little dialogue in this whole sequence. The whole sequence is carried by Murray Gold's score. Now, the score that we have in this particular scene is a track called The Dark and Endless Dalek Night, which actually featured in The Stolen Earth when the Daleks were taking over the Earth. And then we also have I Am the Doctor in there as well, when the Doctor's doing his saving the day and blasting into the wall to put no more on the wall. There's numerous reused tracks from various episodes from 2005 until that point in this episode. You've got I Am the Doctor, you've got The Majestic Tale of a Madman with a Box, you've got The Wedding of River Song, among many others as well. And then you've got new tracks that were released and written exclusively for this particular episode, for this special. But what I really like about that is, again, this is a story, this is a special that is a celebration of everything that's come before in Doctor Who, including the music. So while there are tracks written specifically for this story, why not utilise the great music that Murray has already written to aid many other stories and repurpose them for this episode? And I think that was a really good way of, again, celebrating not just the face value things of Doctor Who, but the things that people might not always think about, the things that might get overlooked, such as the score. Now, I'm a score buff, I love the soundtrack, I love musical scores, so that's the kind of thing I'm going to notice. And I really appreciated that. And again, it was a good balance. Yes, there were lots of reused tracks, but there were also new ones as well. So it didn't feel like cheating as such. Murray still had plenty of work for himself to do there. Anywho, back to the story and the Day of the Doctor. The War Doctor has the moment, and he's taken it to a barn in the middle of a desert. Can I just say, the green-screened background as the Doctor walks from the TARDIS towards the barn, that looks just as good as anything we saw in Boom, for example. And yet this is just your bog standard green-screened CGI background compared to the super-duper high-tech expensive LED screens that we used in Boom. And that to me just highlights the point that I've been making for the last year, that we can still have great Doctor Who without these high-tech, expensive, new special effects devices. You know, to me, the story is what's important, and actually what they managed to achieve with just your bog standard green screen looks just as good. Does the Boom stuff maybe look as slightly more high resolution? Perhaps, but to me that's not the be-all and end-all of what makes a great Doctor Who episode, and I think this shot here is a perfect example of how it can still work without all of that high-tech stuff. Now, I think I've kind of dodged it enough. I think at this point we definitely need to give a whopping up to John Hurt. Now, obviously, when they introduce a new version of the Doctor, there's going to be a little bit of concern, a little bit of what's going on, as we have established in the years since, you know, with the Timeless Child and all those things. What's happening with the count, the numbers of the Doctors, and this is going to just completely upturn everything. John Hurt was the perfect casting choice for this episode, and I think he fits the War Doctor so well. You know, he plays that tired, battle-weary War Doctor so perfectly, and his line delivery is almost Shakespearean, and it really heightens this kind of tragic hero vibe that this incarnation really has going about them. You know, from his first speech here with the voiceover, it's so poignant, and then I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but when he delivers the line, "Great men are forged in fire, it is the privilege of lesser men to light the flame," it's just perfect, almost to the point where it gives you chills. His line delivery is so... I don't even know what the word is. He just plays this version of the character so well. And I think his casting was a blessing to this episode, because in lesser hands, this character really could have fell flat. And this is where I have to give another up to this special. Something that I really appreciate about it is the respect for the show's continuity. I love that Billie Piper returned for this special. But what I love even more is that she wasn't Rose. This worked so much better than them bringing Rose back, and I really appreciate that they were able to bring Billie Piper into the fold, put her into the story without it interfering with Rose's ending and with her story arc. That would have really disappointed me if it just had been Rose and her little ending in the parallel universe had somehow been changed or upturned, or that would have disappointed me. So I really appreciate the thought that went into, right, we want to bring these legacy actors into this special to make it a special event, but how do we do that without causing issues to the continuity of the show so far?
Uncle. Bad wolf.
Now, I don't know about any of you, but the hype surrounding David Tennant's return in 2013 was absolutely magnificent. It was huge. This was his great return. You know, again, you have to remember that now we've had the 60th and it was kind of expected that he would return. But for the 50th, this was his big comeback, his big return since departing as the 10th Doctor. And everyone was so excited for him and Billie Piper. You know, there were shows about it. We had David Tennant and Matt Smith on the Graham Norton show, which was just so brilliant to have them both sat there on the sofa. David Tennant had some weird, like, rat tail hairstyle going on because he was doing a play. There was a Matt Smith lookalike sat on in the red chair. It was just a whole load of fun, and everyone was so excited. And especially because David Tennant had been asked so many times, will you be returning? And he kept saying no. And then bam, here he is. He's back. It was just a very exciting time. I, for one, was very, very excited to see my favourite Doctor back. You know, how old was I? Maybe 15? 14, 15 at the time? 15. Around that. Maths is not my strong suit. Yeah, I think I was about 15 at the time. So even now you get that nostalgia, but even at 15, you know, I watched David Tennant when I was even younger than that, and even 10 years ago, David Tennant's return felt nostalgic and exciting. So we have David Tennant returning as the 10th Doctor and Elizabeth I. Now, I'm sure you will all be thinking the same thing. The Day of the Doctor is actually a very difficult episode to find many downs for. I'm not going to find loads of downs for this episode. It was spectacular. But I do have a very personal down for myself, but considering we're not going to find many for the rest of the episode, I am going to allow it. So I do have one down. While it was great to see David Tennant back and the scenes between Ten and Elizabeth I were very funny and energetic, I did struggle with the casting choice of Joanna Page as Elizabeth I. Don't get me wrong, I have nothing against Joanna Page as an actress. I think she's brilliant and I really loved her in Gavin and Stacey. But therein lies the issue, because she is so well known for playing this overly bubbly, very, very Welsh character. And so even when she's doing an English accent in this role, all I can see is Stacey from Gavin and Stacey, to the point where it kind of took me out of the story because I couldn't see her as Elizabeth I. Now, this is a problem that I've had with other castings as well. For example, I'm thinking The Crown. When Olivia Colman took over playing the Queen Elizabeth II in The Crown, I really struggled to not see Olivia Colman. And sometimes I think that's the problem. If you cast an actor to play a very iconic figure, but the actor themselves is very recognisable and iconic in themselves, it's difficult to stop seeing that actor and start seeing them as this other iconic person. And that's what I found was the issue for me with Joanna Page playing Elizabeth I here. Now, I do appreciate that this is very much a personal thing and depends on whether you've seen Gavin and Stacey. Now, I know that for me, this was an issue. For Danny, he thinks I'm being way too harsh with my down here, but I'm sticking with it because he hasn't seen Gavin and Stacey. And so I can see for him, this is just an actress playing a character. It's when you then have that association that it becomes an issue. Is it a bit of a harsh down? Maybe. But for me, I found it distracting. And as I said, there are not going to be many downs for this episode, if any at all. And so I'm going to allow the criticism for this one thing that I struggled with. Now, the inclusion of the Zygons leads me to another up. We'll step away from the downs now. Another up. And that is the successful inclusion of two major Doctor Who villains. You've got the Daleks in the Time War, and then you've got the Zygons as well. And then on top of that, you've also got 3 different Doctors in 3 different times. All of that put together could have made for a very forced and convoluted story and episode. But instead, what actually ended up happening is that these different time periods and these seemingly different separate stories, they all weave together in the end into one really clever and really poignant story. Now, this is something that Stephen Moffat in particular is very, very skilled at doing. I mean, there's a reason that he was writing Sherlock. You know, it takes a very special kind of mind to be able to create a story that's made up of so many moving parts and for it all to fit together at the end and make total sense. And nothing feels forced or convoluted. You know, it could very easily have gone a different way where a showrunner could have gone, well, it's an anniversary special, so I need to put as many legacy characters into Easter eggs and references into this special so that it feels like a celebration. Yes, that does need to be there to a degree, but what's important is that it's a very interesting and great poignant story. And from the get-go, if you say, I want the Zygons and the Daleks, someone might look at that and go, they're two very, very distinct, iconic villains. How do you plan on making that work? Well, Moffat obviously went, this is exactly how I'm going to make it work, and it does work. And while we're talking about having 3 different Doctors here, of course, we do need to give a major up for the chemistry between Matt Smith, David Tennant, and John Hurt. It's perfect. It works so well, whether it's their first scene together, which is very comical, it's full of banter, full of humour, or whether it's the more dramatic, emotional scenes, such as when they're in the cell together, and it's much more poignant about the Time War and the children that had died in the Time War. They just all bounce off of each other so well. And you can really feel that tension and the connections between these different incarnations of the same character. Again, this could have been a scenario that felt very forced and gimmicky if it wasn't done correctly. If Matt Smith and David Tennant didn't have good humorous chemistry between each other, this could have ended very, very poorly. If John Hurt didn't fit into that mix just as well, if they couldn't carry those scenes and it just again felt like a forced, it's an anniversary special, we need to have multiple Doctors in it, it could again have fallen very flat. But instead, what we get is this heightened emotion and this elevated story that gives us some really beautiful scenes because these 3 actors work so well with each other and the chemistry between them just carries the story. Now, before I move on, I do have a couple of thoughts that I want to just reel off to you with regards to these first few scenes between the different incarnations of the Doctor. First of all, 11 says that he's never seen how skinny 10 is from the outside before. Are we forgetting the whole Metacrisis Doctor situation here? Because he has seen his own body from the outside before. There was a literal double of it. So I was kind of like, that makes no sense. You have seen your body from the outside before. Or did you forget about the whole body duplicate thing? Secondly, I really, really love that the War Doctor points out that the Sonic is a tool, not a weapon. I feel like sometimes the sonic screwdriver, particularly nowadays, it becomes too heavily relied upon. So it was really nice to have recognition here that at the end of the day, the sonic screwdriver is nothing more than a tool. And I think that could be remembered sometimes in episodes when the Sonic saves the day. It should be a tool to help with something as opposed to something to solve the problem. I think using the Sonic to save the day is cheating. It's poor writing, you know? Thirdly, it's hilarious that not one of those 3 Doctors who are supposed to be super duper clever didn't think to check if the door was locked. I found that whole moment absolutely hilarious when Clara just burst through the door and she's like, it wasn't locked. Oh yeah, and of course, I love the fact that 11 uses his wife's phrase, spoilers, right there to deflect from talking about something that he doesn't want to talk about. Also, spoilers is just a thing now, isn't it? I mean, it didn't originate in Doctor Who, but spoilers is used all the time. But for me, it will always, always, always make me think of River Song. Now, something that I haven't really mentioned much yet up until this point is Unit and Kate and Osgood. Now, the whole Zygon situation in the present day, I feel, maybe gets a little bit lost amongst all of these other things that are going on. Now, they're by no means bad scenes. They're not awful scenes at all. They're great scenes, in fact. But I think when they're sandwiched between scenes that contain multiple doctors or that are very dramatic and epic or melodramatic in some aspects, they clearly are going to be the ones that are forgotten about a bit more than everything else. Now, clearly, Kate Stewart is a great character and we've seen her return multiple times since this special, so it's nothing about the characters or the story in particular. But when you've got an episode that's full of so many epic things happening, there are going to be some moments that are less talked about than others. Doesn't mean they're bad, it's just going to happen. And I think that's kind of what's happened with those scenes maybe in the Black Archive between Osgood and McGillop and Kate. It's just not as memorable as the other moments in the episode. Now, within that, there's one character that I'm in two minds about, and that is Osgood. As a character, she's great. I love her, especially when we do see her return in later episodes where the story unfolds a little bit more. And while it is great to have some acknowledgement of the fans in this special, I do feel like the way that Osgood is presented perhaps feels a little bit too cliche and isn't as complimentary as perhaps the creators thought that it might be. To some, it can seem a little bit insulting. You know, she is very much played as the typical fangirl. You know, she's got the inhaler, she's got the costume, she's very stuttery when she's around the Doctor. I do like the character. I just feel like the intention of her character initially was to be a symbol of the fans, and their connotations of the fans there maybe seem a little problematic to me. Again, not a down, to me, not sure how I feel about the purpose of Osgood in this particular episode.
Inhaler!
Now, when we then get back to the barn and all three of the doctors are prepared to hit that big red button, something that really struck a chord with me and felt very relatable and resonated with me was when Clara notes that she knew that the Doctor had wiped out his own people, but she'd never pictured him doing it. You know, since 2005, we've been told that the Doctor committed this awful act and destroyed his own people. And we've seen the effect that this had on him. But like Clara, I could never have pictured Christopher Eccleston or David Tennant or Matt Smith's Doctors actually committing the act themselves. And it kind of adds this whole extra layer, more depth and realness to everything that we know about the Time War when we're seeing our Doctors actually there, prepared to commit this act that pulls so heavily on their hearts. So I think it was really nice actually, and kind of eye-opening to have Clara acknowledge that, because yes, we keep being told that the Doctor did this, but I've never pictured any of those Doctors doing it. But of course, all three of them put together, they find an alternative solution, and that leads to a wonderful addition to this special, taken up, no sir, all 13 of them. So first of all, the inclusion of Peter Capaldi, who had just been announced to be playing the 12th Doctor, but as of yet was not the Doctor. We were still on Matt Smith, and it was totally unexpected to see him appear in this sequence. Totally unexpected. Nobody saw that coming. So that was brilliant. But beyond that, this brief but poignant inclusion of every single actor who has played the Doctor since 1963 worked so incredibly well. I mean, a bit like the opening homage, it didn't drag anything out, it didn't feel forced in any way, but it did allow a moment of recognition for all of the previous incarnations of the Doctor and the people who played that character, and the significance of the role they played in the legacy of this show. But it didn't feel overpacked, it didn't drag out for too long, and that's what makes these moments so much more poignant. They serve the purpose they're there to do. They shine a light on all of those who have held the mantle for the last 50 years of Doctor Who, and then it moves swiftly on. So, Gallifrey is safe, frozen in time somewhere, but safe, and nobody will ever try to destroy it ever again. And after we return to the present day, we come back to the National Gallery. We have a little tea party because it's oh so very British, and Doctor Who is a British show after all. And then, my friends, we come to the moment I've been so excited to unleash, for the moment you've all been waiting for, my friends. Let's go to my Artron Up. My Artron Up, of course, has to be Tom Baker. Tom freaking Baker! The thing is, his voice is so iconic that he's immediately recognised in this moment before you've even seen his face. And more importantly, I know that now, in recent years, it's become more common to expect to see previous actors who've played the Doctor return as the Doctor as their older selves, especially since the power of the Doctor. You know, going into the 60th, there was so much speculation about which incarnations of the Doctor are we going to see? Are we going to have this actor returning? Is this actor going to return? At this point in 2013, this was unprecedented. We knew it was a multi-Doctor story. We were having David Tennant returning, Billie Piper was returning, you had the War Doctor there alongside Matt Smith. We weren't expecting any other Doctors to appear, and especially since we just had that lovely little moment, that brief recognition of all the previous actors who'd played the Doctor, we were not expecting Tom Baker to just pop up at the end of this episode, and it was absolutely perfect. And when you watch this episode now in hindsight, since we've had the 60th anniversary specials and the whole bi-generation situation, it basically adds this whole new layer of speculation over who the curator actually is. Is he actually the Doctor? Now, at the time, it might not really have made much sense for the curator to be the Doctor. How is he the Doctor? How can he revisit old faces? Why does he look older? You know, all these questions were flying around, but we didn't care because it was just so fantastic to see Tom Baker on screen that we just overlooked it. It was great. We don't care. But now, in hindsight, you can add some sense to that moment. And it was a really, really wonderful moment. I remember watching that episode, and Tom Baker was my mum's Doctor. And so watching the special, all of us sat around, family watching, Tom Baker, my mum was going mental. She's like, that's Tom Baker! It just had that moment for the classic fans as well as the modern fans. You've got David Tennant, who's there for the modern viewer, but then for Tom Baker to be there for the classic viewer, he's also, again, alongside David Tennant, probably the most popular actor to play the Doctor, the most popular Doctor. He's the longest serving Doctor. So it was great for Tom Baker to be there. And then we close this special with this beautiful speech from 11 about his dreams of going home. You know what, actually, let's have an up for that speech as well, because it's a really beautiful way to close out the episode. And then we have this final lineup of all the incarnations of the Doctor looking out at Gallifrey. If I'm being honest, this part to me felt a little bit kind of outside of the episode. If it had been in any other episode, I think it may have seemed a bit odd, a little bit strange. But because it was the 50th, it was a nice image to close out the story on, to close out the special on. But I think if it had been anywhere else, it seemed a bit meta? I don't know, it just seemed a bit odd, them all kind of looking at each other. Image-wise, like as a nice closing image, it looked great. But just in general, it was like, are you maybe he was dreaming! That would make more sense. It's a speech about him dreaming. If it's a dream sequence, then yeah, great. I love it. Let's go with that. Perfect way to end the episode. And of course, there are so many lines in this episode, so many little interactions between characters that just are so brilliant. I can't list them all, and I can't up them all because that would just make our up counter go ridiculously crazy. But I am going to quickfire some of the interactions, some of the dialogue that is worth mentioning here. So we first of all have 11 saying, "It's a timey-wimey thing." And then you've got the War Doctor going, "Timey what? Timey-wimey?" And then 10 just standing there going, "I have no idea where he picks that up from." Okay, this one's a little bit more serious. We've got the War Doctor saying, "I have no desire to survive this." And the Moment replying, "Then that's your punishment. If you do this, if you kill them all, then that's the consequence. You survive." Ooh, chills! Oh, that's not the words, it's "you live." And then the War Doctor saying to 11, "Are you capable of speaking without flapping your hands about?" Yes. No. Oh, of course, we can't forget bad wolf girl, I could kiss you. She goes, yep, that's gonna happen. He goes, sorry, did you just say bad wolf? Overall, I think this worked so well as an anniversary celebration. I think the choice to focus on such a prominent plot device of the modern era, being the Time War and the Daleks and the Doctor destroying Gallifrey, I think that was a really smart move, and having the introduction of the War Doctor actually worked really, really well, and I felt like it added a missing link to this story. It almost felt like it was filling the gap of the wilderness years, because we kind of did have that jump, and we're told that this great thing happened in that gap, but it was nice to finally fill in that gap, close the link, and like I mentioned earlier, see a Doctor actually commit those acts. But where to us it just didn't make sense ever to picture our Doctor doing that, it made total sense to put one in between that was kind of shunned away and forgotten about because he had to live with what he'd done. I really think that was a really good way of approaching the Time War without suddenly burdening a previous incarnation of the Doctor or one of these modern incarnations of the Doctor with actually having to commit that act. And what we ended up in the end, what the result was this true event feeling. This special did feel like an event, to the point where, you know, when this special aired, immediately after, we had like a chat show on the BBC immediately after with people discussing it. I remember Colin Baker was on there because he had Crocs on. Why do I remember that? I don't know why I remember that, but Colin Baker was sat on that sofa talking about the episode with, I can't remember who he was there with, but all I remember thinking was, he's sat there in Crocs. Oh, the things you remember. Anyway, I hope that you all enjoyed our very first retro ups and downs. If you would like to see us do more of these, then please do let us know in the comments which episodes you would like us to do a review of. I can't promise that they'll be coming anytime soon. We have got a Christmas special coming, so of course that will take priority for now, but we will make note of your suggestions, and when the time comes, keep your eyes peeled for another retro ups and downs from WhoCulture. I've been Ellie for WhoCulture, and in the words of Riversong herself, goodbye, sweeties.